Get your coffee. Mmm. Good stuff. Hey, Eric. So, once we get a few people in here, we're going to talk about Russia and Putin, our favorite topic, and President Trump. Good morning, good morning. It's Mimi. Hello, Mimi. Danville. Hello, Danville. It's practically walking distance. All right, so here's what I wanted to talk about today. I talk often about something called, it's my name for it, the high ground maneuver. And in the context of persuasion, what it means is you take people out of the weeds, the little arguments, the bickering, like you did this, X is true, Y is true, you got your facts wrong, that sort of stuff. And you elevate it to a higher level where everyone on both sides just says, yeah, that sounds right. And I wanted to give you an example of that. There's a really good example in the news right now. You're all aware that the G20 meeting happened and President Trump met with Putin, and one of the topics was the alleged Russian meddling in the U.S. elections. Now, the controversy today is that although President Trump brought it up and pressed the point a few times during the meeting, we're told that Russia says that he accepted their assurances that they weren't involved, which I'm sure wasn't exactly what happened. And then the Trump administration's explanation of what happened is that Putin said he wasn't involved, and after pressing it a few times, they decided to focus on the future, or as moving forward, as they put it. Now, that's the high ground maneuver. Now, think about this framing, all right? So you've got the critics coming at you, and they say, hey, you didn't do enough about what they did on the election. You need to do more about what happened for the election. Now, if you engage on that level and you say, well, I tried my best and I didn't get anything done, well, then you're a failure. If you don't try, then you're also a failure. So if you stay in the weeds of fighting over what did Russia do or not do, or what are they admitting to, what are we going to do about it, about the election, you can never really win that, because Russia's not going to admit they did anything, and there's not much you can do about it anyway, other than whatever our CIA is doing, and that's not public anyway. So instead, Rex Tillerson, who I'm starting to believe is a master persuader himself, he's very good at this, by the way. Rex Tillerson and President Trump decided to frame it this way. They said, how about we focus on the future? Now think about it, hold on. Think about how that changes the frame. Because imagine you're the critic, all right? So you're the critic of President Trump, and he just said about Russia, we're going to focus on the future and getting things right from this point on. We're not going to, dwell on the past. What exactly is your counter argument to that? No, let's focus on the past. Now, you can make a coherent argument that says, we have to deal with the past or else it'll be harder to move forward or anything. But the trouble is, it becomes sort of a conceptual, you have to sort of trust that there might be some reason to focus on the past, and not everybody agrees, and how exactly does focusing on the past help you in the future? It's not entirely clear. So even though you could make an argument for focusing on the past, there's nobody who hears this framing and doesn't immediately rise to it. And the framing is, let's focus on the future. Because if you were to look at the entire past of all the things that Russia has done to us, all the things that we've done to them, even recently, you don't have to go that far back. just the stuff we've done to them and the things they've done back, there'd be plenty of reasons to disagree. But as soon as he says, let's focus on the future, the critics do some version of this. Yeah, but, damn it, the future is definitely better than the past. Let me give you another example of this from the past. You remember perhaps when Clinton and Gore, I use this example a lot, but it's good to remind you, Clinton and Gore were running for re-election against Bob Dole and Jack Kemp. And Bob Dole was making his argument about how he was going to take the good qualities of the past, the greater generation, the higher moral standard that we imagined people had in the past, and he was going to bring that to the future, I guess. The trouble was that as soon as Clinton framed Dole as planning for the past, and he said, but Clinton and Gore will be building you a bridge to the future, Dole was done. Because even though Dole's argument made total sense when you heard it in isolation, oh yeah, there were good qualities that America had in the past, and he's a representative of those qualities, and he'll bring some of those qualities to us. That makes perfect sense, right? As a proposition, I can't judge how important that is, but as a proposition, it's rational. Until somebody says, no, we're planning for the future. Bob Dole's planning for the past. The moment you hear that, Bob Dole became irrelevant. Right? That's the same play that President Trump and Tillerson did on the Russia critics. The moment you hear them say, yeah, you could keep planning for the past, we can keep working on the past, or we could work on the future. Pick one. I don't have time to do both. Do you want me to work on the past or work on the future? It's such a strong reframing that it just sort of takes the piss out of the whole argument. And I don't think people have quite realized how strong it is. Because how the hell do you argue for the past? Who's on that side? Who would want to willingly identify with, yeah, let's relitigate the past? It's just silly once they framed it that way. All right. I posted 2 blog posts today. One of them, the most recent one, is about how a third of the country can't recognize humor even when they see it. And I posted 2 videos that were satirical that people widely thought were real because they just couldn't identify the humor. Now, part of the problem is, to be fair, that in both cases, they were such good, spot-on impressions of people on the left going crazy about President Trump that it was hard to distinguish satire from reality, because the reality is so close to satire right now that there just wasn't a lot of space. Now, in my case, I got all kinds of shit for my Periscope yesterday, in part because I got cut off. So I was doing this Periscope in which I was pretending to be afraid that President Trump was meeting with all these world leaders, because it's scary enough that he meets with one world leader if you're on the left. But what would happen if he met with 19 other leaders at the same time? The danger would be immeasurably higher. Anyway, so I pretended I was saying that sincerely, and the video got cut off before I took that to a more ridiculous level, which would have made it obvious to anybody watching it that I was kidding. But still, people should have figured out I was kidding from the part that did get included in the video. And then there's a separate video of a woman who's doing a similar type of spoof. I was embarrassed for those who didn't get it, yeah. And she was Oscar level, you were a bit less. Yeah, her acting skills were better than mine. She had a good fake cry going and everything. So the other post I did today on my blog over at dilbert.com is how a lot of problems are information problems in disguise. So North Korea and the North Korean nuclear risk, I would argue, might be an information problem that we think is a military problem. And here's what I mean. Imagine, if you will, that the citizens of the United States knew which American companies were doing the most business with China. If we wanted to, Americans could simply buy less from those companies, or just put pressure on them. Maybe you want to keep buying from them because you don't want the company to fail, but you could put pressure on them to stop using China as a builder of their components. You could put pressure on them over time to replace China as a player in their value chain, if you wanted to. So it seems to me that we're at a point where information will solve most problems when combined with social media. Because if America knew which American companies were having the most impact on China, if only 20% of Americans acted differently and looked at it and said, well, saying the information is available is different from saying it's being passed around in some viral way and it's presented in a way that people can easily understand and stuff. There's sort of a big difference between information is available and information is easily accessible. That they become so different in practice that, it's almost as if the information doesn't exist if it's inconvenient. Both statements can't be true. Don't know what that means. Yeah, you have to reduce it to a meme. So somebody asked me if I have direct communication with anybody in the White House. And the answer is, in a sense, because social media connects everybody to everything. So what I often say is that the good ideas travel and the bad ideas die. So I have enough followers. You can see 1,000 people or so were watching me here, and there's 163,000 people follow me on Twitter. So if I accidentally came up with a good idea, the odds of that good idea reaching the right people is really close to 100% now. So for example, if I had let's say miraculously I had some great idea about some better way to do some business that people are already in, the odds of that getting to the people who are doing startups in that business and are in that industry are really high, because people like to forward things that are relevant to their friends. So one does not need a direct contact to the White House anymore if your idea is good. If your idea is good, it's going to get there. If it's not, it should not have gotten there. I love the CNN memes. Why does half the country believe the fake Russia narrative? My general statement is that you can get 20% of the public to believe absolutely anything. All right. So, and the more you repeat something, the more likely somebody's going to believe it. So, given the repetition and the reputation of CNN as a purveyor of news, the people on the left would find them to be quite credible. It's only the people on the right who find it not credible. So, in that condition, you can make anybody believe anything. Do you watch Sunday shows? I probably will in a minute. Billy Jack meme. Is Van Jones persuading the debate be moved to ideas? That's the trouble. When people say, hey, let's work on our policies and our ideas, that lacks any appreciation of persuasion. Because the people with the best policies and the best ideas, in a political sense, tend not to be necessarily successful unless those ideas have to do with something with persuasion. And by the way, when I talk about my ideas that might travel, those ideas are typically in the field of persuasion. Ericksonian hypnosis, what about it? The Sam Harris, I think that's this week. I'll record it this week. I don't know. I'm not sure when he airs the stuff that gets recorded. How important is it for a persuader to believe the things he says? It helps, but it's not absolutely necessary. Isn't persuasion just the art of logical presentation? No, it's pretty much the opposite of that. I can tell you're new here. I don't mean that as an insult, but no, a good logical presentation of the facts hasn't persuaded many people in the history of humanity. How do we address the heroin epidemic? Well, it's not just heroin. I think the pills are the big problem too. Yeah, I'm starting to think that there might not be any way to, the opioids. I don't know that there is any way to fix that. I haven't seen anybody with a good idea on that. See, the trouble is that the opioids are so powerful that they completely overwhelm your common sense for sure, your sense of logic, your sense of reason, but even your survival instinct. The opioids actually remove your survival instinct. I don't know what you do about a drug like that. Yeah, and you can't really restrict them too much. Alternative meds. Fear of losing something is most persuasive. Well, no, fear is most persuasive in general. Fear of losing something would be, sometimes low on the list of your fears. Fear of being killed is more persuasive than fear of losing your phone. Some suggest legalization and treatment. Ever notice that success doesn't feel as good as you thought it would? I tell this story a lot. The first time in my career that I got a check from a publisher that was so big I knew I wouldn't have to work again. And it was just depressing. Because I was in my 30s, and suddenly I realized I never had to work again. Well, what the hell else am I going to do? What's the point of it all? I don't enjoy recreation that much. So yes, success can be terribly unsettling, and it does throw some people into panic and depression and stuff like that. Now, in my case, I fairly quickly reinterpreted my life to, essentially focus outward, because once I got what I needed, it was more meaningful to focus on helping other people. So that's what I do for. So if you're saying that success was less enjoyable than I thought, the answer is absolutely, if you're looking at the success in isolation. Just sitting in a chair and saying, hey, I'm really successful, it doesn't really feel as good as you hope it would. It feels good. Don't get me wrong. You should definitely try to be successful if you have a chance. It feels good, but not as good as you thought it would. you have to do something with it. No one cares, old man. You have to actually do something with it, or else, or else it is lonely at the top, as you say. My favorite causes, it really is any kind of major world problem that could be solved by thinking about it better. That's sort of where my interests are. All right. I think I've done enough, and I've got to go do some work today because I work every day, unlike you people who take time off. Anyway, somebody said I shouldn't have a sign-off because it makes it look too scripted. They're probably right. So I'm just going to say goodbye for tonight, or for today.